District Attorney Samar Stephan has devoted her life to protecting children and families, providing justice to the most vulnerable, and is a national leader in the fight against human trafficking and sexual exploitation. Samar is focused on advancing public safety through fair and equal justice, bringing solutions to complex issues with a unique, data-driven, common sense approach. As district attorney, she leads the second largest DA's office in California, managing a professional staff of 1,000 employees, serving as the people's prosecutor for San Diego County. Samar Stephan rose through the ranks to become the elected district attorney. As a trial prosecutor, she tried more than 100 jury trials, including cases of complex homicides, sexual violent predators, child molestation, sexual assault, school shooting, and human trafficking related cases. She also holds leadership positions in public safety in various organizations, and she's the recipient of numerous local, state, and federal awards. And Anna will be adding the full resume and bio of Samar Stephan right here in your chat. So, and now I present to you Samar Stephan, San Diego District Attorney, so we can learn more about how many people are trafficked in the US every year, who's vulnerable, who are the traffickers, how do traffickers control victims. And I give to you District Attorney Samar Stephan, and you have 20 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rima. That's a tall order to cover those topics in 20 minutes, but we will certainly try. Getting to know you and learning about everything that you're doing in this fight makes me very honored to be here this morning with you and with all of the supporters and the people with big hearts interested in ending slavery around the world and here also in California. So like Rima said, I rose through the ranks. So I've been at the DA's office for 30 years. That's longer than I've been alive, not as a prosecutor fighting for justice. So this is kind of like in my DNA, what we do. This is what our life is about. But during this journey, Rima mentioned a report, and I'm not going to use PowerPoint because you're gonna, and the reason I'm not going to is because I have 20 minutes. My rule is if it's over 30 minutes, I use PowerPoint to keep people's attention. But having tried 100 cases, hopefully I'll be able to hold your attention. And also because this information kind of has to seep into your heart and your mind to really comprehend it. And so I'm going to give you, the ground view of Can you guys hear me?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Did you hear me before or just now?
No, we've been hearing you the whole time.
Okay, I saw something that said I was muted, so I got nervous. Okay, perfect, I'm fine. I'm glad I didn't say something wrong already, Rima, that's good.
Oh, you didn't. Let me remind everyone to mute their phone or mute themselves, please, because there has been some distractions when the district attorney started speaking. So please mute yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'm going to focus on this topic of child exploitation and human trafficking. So along this journey of my career of 28 years before I became the elected district attorney, we had a report that came in from the FBI, and Rima mentioned it. And in those days, you didn't get email. You actually got physical reports, and this was around 2003, and then I got a second report, a follow-up report, and it named San Diego as on the top 13 cities, regions for what the FBI called at the time, high intensity child prostitution. Now, this is very important because I knew from my time on the streets, working with officers, working undercover operations, that there is no such thing as child prostitution. And this is such a misnomer. People don't understand this. And in fact, the buyers want to believe because it kind of excuses and normalizes their behavior that these are promiscuous kids who want to have a lot of sex all the time, instead of thinking of them as victims, as child abuse. So why was our society differentiating between sexual abuse of a child by, for example, a priest or a Boy Scout manager, like we're seeing now, the largest case, or an uncle, stepfather? Why did we distinguish it so that now if you pay $50 for it, it's no longer child sexual abuse? In fact, it was clear to me when I got this report immediately, and that this is a horrendous crime. I say this to set you up for some things that people don't understand. And that's when I said that in 2003, 2004, leading into 2005, we in fact did not have a human trafficking law in the state of California. So all I could do is look at it and say, this is a horrendous crime. How could it be? This makes no sense to me that you have a child, and if someone abuses them sexually, that's a crime. But if they abuse them sexually, but you pay for it, which should be an even more aggravated crime, a violent felony like Rima was mentioning, it is now just prostitution, a misdemeanor. Okay, that makes absolutely no sense. And that's such a terrible reflection on our values as a society. Having been on these undercover operations, I have a very understanding husband. So that means I'm all night in a hotel with a camera, next door to where there is an undercover operation, and we're trying to stop the buyers as we have a setup decoy. I knew that what you needed to rent a hotel room. You needed to drive to the hotel room. I mentioned hotels because hotels are the #1 location for sex trafficking in the state and in the country, according to Polaris and according to our study. So how do you pay for it? If you're a 15-year-old, how are you paying for your hotel room? How are you driving yourself there? How are you negotiating this whole thing where somebody's buying you and you're setting a price? Absolutely did not make sense. We knew someone was pulling the strings, but we could not tie the pieces together. Dug and dug. And I was very fortunate because this was my passion. So I pioneered a sex crimes division to deal with the most vulnerable sex victims, a specialized unit. And 2 years ago, I'm very proud to say that that unit was featured in the New York Times as the real life version of Law and Order Special Victims Unit, because of the approach, the multidisciplinary victim advocates, specialized prosecutors, investigators, all surrounding the victim. So because of that specialized knowledge, we knew that this was not right. So we went to bat to set a law, a new law that made California a state where human trafficking, which includes the selling of children for sex, a felony crime of human trafficking. And because we were already set up as a unit and I was the chief of that division, this is in 2005, the law passed in California and it became law, and it allowed us to then prosecute the first case under that stateside human trafficking law. So I say this to give all of us hope. These laws, even federally, did not pass till the year 2000. The Trafficking Prevention Act passed in 2000. So we're only 20 years into this fight in this nation. And in California, we're only 15 years into this fight. So we are building the plane as we're flying it. We're developing new strategies. We're looking for the community and for the survivors to tell us what the solutions are. And so because of this, we prosecuted this case, and I wish I had more time, but you'll have to invite me again. When we took this case to court, the judge was looking for the movie Taken. He was looking for a victim that was international, that was kidnapped off the street, that was put in a trunk of a car, that was, beaten to a pulp, chained, and then trafficked, right? But that was not the case. The case was an American girl who got in a car voluntarily because she wanted to go to a party. Doesn't make her a bad person. Young people make terrible decisions all the time, but it doesn't cost them their life. And then after that, they drugged her, and essentially she was like a corpse, and they were selling her for sex and made a ton of money in one night, subjecting her to violence, to diseases, to humiliation. They took pictures of her, and they wanted to use those pictures to extort her into continuing to be sold this way. But fortunately, this girl was able to get away and call police, and police didn't know what to do with this case. They didn't know what to call it. It's not a kidnap per se. She got into the car. What is it? But because the law was so new, they knew to call me, and I said, I think this is going to be our first human trafficking case. And there it went. We started to build the blocks, build the blocks, build the blocks. We realized that we could not do this alone. So we formed an advisory council that has 9 different subcommittees, because when it comes to a complex issue that is so old, historic, from the time of Pompeii, and the slaves that were captured. You don't want to hear about my visit there, where our tour guide explained that these victims could buy their freedom, the ones that died with a chain around them. And I asked him how many bought their freedom, and he didn't have an answer, because of course it was never going to happen. But this is the delusion that people have about victims in sex trafficking, that this is somehow a choice. So after this, we started to build this committee, and this committee that I had the honor of chairing before being elected DA had education subcommittee. It had the schools at the table, child welfare, because we know a lot of foster kids are victims and targets of this. It had the medical field, because the medical intervention and detection saved our lives in regular sexual assault and also in domestic violence detection, but is not set up for human trafficking. So we started from scratch there. Then we had the law enforcement subcommittee, of course, the prosecution subcommittee, and we had a community subcommittee. We had the survivor voice, because we want to know what they think works. What would have stopped them? What would have had them learn that they are going to be trapped? And we had the victim services subcommittee. So all working together, we became the blueprint of how you fight this problem from every angle. And we had a very strong research and data subcommittee. So research and data, we asked them to give us numbers, because like Rima said, in the area of human trafficking, because it's the #1 underreported crime. Picture a victim. How is a victim of sex trafficking going to report that she's a victim when our media, our culture confuses the heck out of them, where they don't even know that they are a victim? They think that if they haven't been beaten daily, if they agree to the sex to being sold because this is their only choice, that they're not a victim. And we wanted the numbers. So we opened our books. This is a very, very dangerous thing for a district attorney to do, which is to open your books, to have your service providers open their books, to open the doors of our prisons, because they can actually go in and talk to the sex offenders and predators. It's ethical. It's not ethical for me to do it. So this became a 1,200 person respondent study. So it became a landmark study in the country. With any of you who have psychology degrees, that was my undergraduate degree. That's a very high statistical number. And because of that, the Department of Justice funded it by $500,000. And this study by USD in Point Loma Nazarene gave us this number. So we're a population of 3.3 million in San Diego. We're the second largest in the state. We believe that we're representative of every area in the entire country that is an urban place like us. You know, I doubt very much that Orange County is different, or Riverside is different, or LA is different. There's no reason for it to be different. And here are the results. The results were that it confirmed this study only studied sex trafficking, did not study labor, which is absolutely very important. But in sex trafficking, it found that in San Diego, we had on an average about 5,000 victims annually, a minimum of 3,200, and on the upper end, 7,000. The reason the disparity is because one number comes from the mouth of victims, one number comes from the mouth of the predators. The predators had a higher number because the victims often didn't know that that predator had other victims. So let's average it to 5,000. It's an $810 million industry, underground criminal industry in San Diego annually. 80%, 80% of the victims are American-born US citizens. Only 20% are international, which says this is everybody's problem. The predators are mostly connected with gangs, but when they do their predation, their trafficking work, they are almost like free agents. So they cross territories, and not like in drug dealing or arms sales. They're not localized, and that's because their product is very transportable and can hide in plain view. You know, if you have drugs in a car, if you have guns in a car, cops stop you, they're gonna immediately know that you are operating illegally. You have a woman in the car or a girl in the car, if she doesn't speak or say that she's in trouble, they can't keep holding that person. So they have to let that person go. So that's what makes it the most profitable within the mind of the predators, the least risky for them. So how do you fight something that is that much of a monster, where you have even your very victim can't speak, doesn't know they're a victim? You cannot fight it the traditional law enforcement way. This is not a robbery series, a homicide series that we know how to do every day and Sunday. So we needed the experts, and this study informed us that the average age in San Diego is 16.1. That's a very young 16-year-old. It also told us this crosses races, although it is more inequitably targeting kids of color. It also showed us that the traffickers are all colors and races also. This is not right to paint it as a pimping kind of African American thing. This is there's a lot of cartels operating in the Mexican culture. There's a lot of white gangs, Aryan gangs and others that use this as the gift for committing a murder or doing something else. So this crosses all lines. So with this study, then we went to work on how do we fight it. Now that we have a lot of information, We also know that the number one tool that the traffickers use is not kidnap, it is psychological kidnap, is what I call it, which is using social media. Over 70% is using social media to groom and recruit a victim right out of her home. When I first started with this, we only had mostly victims that were in foster care, runaways. No longer. We see them in every socioeconomic sector because every kid, no matter how poor or rich, has a phone. During COVID, we noticed an alarming trend. We set up a 24/7 human trafficking task force. We also have an internet crimes against children task force. We noticed that the reports of internet crimes against children, let's take the month of May in San Diego, are normally around 150. They had gone up to close to 700. We saw that in our human trafficking task force, the numbers of adult victims of human trafficking had not gone up during COVID, but the number of children being trafficked had gone up. Almost every night, the task force is tracking a 14-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 15-year-old. 15 seems to be the most common age we are seeing currently during COVID. And that's because kids aren't in their schools, their faith places, their sports, they're on their phone all the time. And that creates such a target-rich environment for the predators. All they have to do, just think for a second, when I try to talk to juries to have them understand this, think of someone whose brain is fully developed, they're not a teenager, they're a full adult, they have bachelor's degrees, and they're on their Facebook. And someone who knows someone starts to compliment them, compliment their work, compliment how they look, compliment their intelligence, act like they care about their concerns and that they've lost a father, or pretty soon that label of friend that you see on Facebook, you actually believe. That person becomes a friend, and you're, even no matter how smart you are, you might be ready to meet with that person because you now trust them. Picture a child who's isolated or had a bad day at school or has a learning disability or doesn't feel like they fit in. And now these predators have quasi-psychology degrees. They're studying their profile. They're studying their needs, their interests. Parents are busy. They're not taking time to study their kids' interests, not because they're bad parents, but because they think their child is in their back bedroom. Now, pretty soon, the exploitation, sometimes it takes only a week and the child falls. Sometimes it takes months, but you know what? This is very lucrative. So why wouldn't a predator spend months grooming that child until she runs away with him? So that's the story. That's what doesn't get out. We dramatize, and what happens is when we dramatize beyond how it really happens, what happens is our victims don't know they're victims. We continue to perpetrate stereotypes that don't help our kids get away from their crime or report. The number one thing parents do when I talk to parents is they take away the phone for what, a day or two or a week. And then the parent needs the kid to have the phone because they need to communicate, and then it starts back up. That's not the solution. The solution is building trust. So you're telling your child, if someone who we don't know, who's not in your school, is not alive in our circle, contacts you, tell me. That's the contract I have with you. And no passwords that parents don't know. Then based on that, I will make your phone safe. I will not take it away from you. I will make you safe. And if you screw up, I will welcome you back. So I'm going to leave this topic for a second and tell you, as Rima mentioned, that prevention is the key. Because I cannot begin to explain to you what the look in a 16-year-old's eyes are, an 18-year-old, a 22-year-old. after they've spent a year being sold like a piece of pizza, and terrible things happen to these victims, and it's like their soul has been ripped out of them. This makes me so angry, but I have to convert my anger into action. That's what victims need from us. And so prevention is the key. Why do we keep swimming upstream? Why can't we not hand social media to our kids without a manual on how to operate it, who's coming through it? That's a responsibility of our educational system. We must explain what's happening to our kids. And that's why we started the prevention program that we did. And you can find it at sdtpc.org, which is San Diego Trafficking Prevention Collective.org. And what it does is it teaches the teachers, integrates with 5th, 7th, 9th, and 11th grade curriculum so that we're still meeting curriculum. And by doing that, then the teacher becomes the transmitter of the information. And then there's 2 other programs that come alongside to bolster that information in high-risk schools. We also, so that's the prevention. We also had to advance the protection of victims, have more shelters, have more specific complex trauma care, have an integration system where these victims can find other jobs. Now, when we rescue them and they're 25, what else do they know how to do? We have to be able to clear their criminal records, and we have to be able to integrate them back into society. And so that's really important. The prosecution, still my favorite part, putting the bad guys away, and gals sometimes. You need a 24/7 task force to do that correctly. And that's what we're doing. And then the partnerships like we're doing today. Quickly, I want to go to the laws that were mentioned. The laws about, this is a demand and supply. This is supply and demand. The demand side is a traffic ticket, essentially. It's a fine, it's a misdemeanor, it's less than a DUI or a petty theft to ruin someone's life. I've tried, I went all the way to the governor's desk and it was vetoed. I had a bill too that we pushed through, got through the Senate, the Assembly, it got vetoed. We're gonna try again this coming session. We're gonna go at it again. The violent felony thing was put in a proposition and to not allow releases of human traffickers, and it failed in California. So it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try again and that it's not violent. The child marriage thing is something that I definitely want to take on alongside you, Rima, and we will do some research and maybe I've been able to pass several laws. One of them is the first human trafficking law in the state. Second, a law that made it that if a trafficker has a prior incident of human trafficking, that victim can testify to support a new victim, which was not part of our evidence code, which is a huge thing because when a victim is able to escape an old victim and now is an adult and gets it, she can support one that still thinks she's in love with the trafficker and so on and so forth. And then also we passed a law that if a trafficker has multiple victims, we can try them in one county so that the victims don't have to go through each trial in a different county, because many of them take these victims across different counties. And then we also passed a hotel education bill that requires hotels to do prevention education. So we've become pretty good in San Diego at passing laws that need to be passed, which I'm happy to look at the child marriage law and work on that. So I know, Rima, you want me to leave time for questions. I think I kind of let me just hit briefly the labor trafficking. I just served on the Hoover Commission, which focused on labor trafficking. Labor trafficking is extremely important, and actually as difficult as sex trafficking is to detect, labor trafficking is even more difficult. And the reason is that, you know how I told you that 80% of victims in sex trafficking are domestic US citizens? In labor trafficking, that's not the case. They are mostly immigrants that don't know their rights as workers. They don't know their right to minimum wage, their right to not be forced to work 24/7, their right to hold on to their own documents, their own passport. All of those things labor trafficking victims don't know. And they think they just made a bad choice and that they have a bad boss. They don't know that they're labor trafficking victims. But what we learned recently is that actually a large percentage come here through an H1, H2 visa, and then the trafficker allows the visa to expire in order to control them further. So they're promised a certain job, but when they come, it's a different job. It's a nurse job, but it turns out to be a 24/7 janitorial. They're being offered different opportunities, but they turn different. So this is another monster that we're tackling. We introduced a bill, again, the governor vetoed it, but it seems like anything that goes to victims doesn't go through, but if it supports criminals, it flies through Sacramento these days. But, hope spring eternal. We're going to keep fighting. This is a fight worth having. And we'll try to get this governor's ear to listen to our concerns.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, District Attorney, for all this information and for your fight against human trafficking. We actually partnered with a 3 Strands Global Foundation, and we're trying to raise funds in order to bring that program into public schools in Orange County through grants and donations. And I know that Anna has posted that link. And we also have a meeting coming up with the Orange County Department of Education to talk more about that. So one of the, Anna, do we have any questions before I ask mine? Let's give precedence to our guests and then I'll ask my questions.
Yes, we do, but I think we're all thinking the same thing. We all want to learn more about why those bills were vetoed and if there's anything different that could be done strategically to see if that we're referring to the bill that would make human trafficking a felony or a violent felony, not a misdemeanor. Is there anything different that could be done on the approach to make sure that it goes through this time?
I am not optimistic on the violent felony end. I am more optimistic on the increase of penalties for the buyers, for the demand side. And the reason I say that is because there's been a big effort to empty the prisons, and violent felonies are prison felonies. So that is what they always resort to, that if something is a violent felony, you cannot get probation and you cannot go to local jail, and you have to serve 85% of your sentence as opposed to 50% of your sentence. And so they fall back on that. This is what all the legal analysis shows, that it's gonna add to the impact on prisons being impacted. And so what my team, I just met with my legislative team, tells me is that it's still a closed door, but it doesn't mean it's worth having. It's not worth having. Now, mind you, we still sentence traffickers to 16 years to 15 years to life, depending on the crime, 12 years in prison. Yes, they serve half of it, and which is disgusting, but it's still something. It is still pretty substantial prison sentences. And that's the answer we get back still on this.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a question for you. Would you explain more about the the crimes of sexting and sextortion, because it appears I used to do 10 to 12 speaking engagements a month in person before COVID, and now more than that virtually. And a lot of the parents and our young adults do not understand that it is a crime when you send a text, although you're a minor, when you send a text to another one of pictures of yourself, uh, if you can explain that, nude pictures or other type of pictures.
Right. So if it's under 18 and it's a picture of an intimate part, it's still child pornography. And transmitting those photos, even if it's to a friend, a girlfriend, is still a crime of transmitting child pornography. Now, of course, we deal with minors doing that in our juvenile justice system, which works on rehabilitation, but it's still a crime and we don't explain it well. In addition, child pornography, when we talk to the buyers, the sex buyers, the demand side, many of them trace their problems to child pornography. It's the fact that they cannot have natural, healthy relationships with an intimate partner because their whole sexualization began with these images of child pornography that are not healthy, that often show violence, they show manipulation and control. So child pornography and its accessibility so readily available is a huge problem, and it is what is driving this kind of demand industry. Even, you know, when we talk to a lot of the married men that get arrested, which most of them are married, it's because this is what they're seeking. It's those images that they've seen that have now warped their mind. So yes, Rima, it is just transmitting a picture. It doesn't matter what age you are. It is child pornography, but we really try to treat it differently when it comes to minors.
Thank you. And on your website, and I know that Anna has posted there, you indicated that 1 out of 5 gets unsolicited marriages, 1 out of 4 minors get unsolicited pornographic information. And 60% of them have responded to people they don't know. And so parents need, like you suggested, to have that honest discussion with their kids. And I know Anna has posted 5 ways on how to talk to your children about the dangers of human trafficking and sex trafficking. And there are 5 applications that can be used as filters in order to keep children safe, and that they need to talk to the kids about identifying a safe person, either a parent or a relative, an adult that they can tell anything to when they encounter unwanted pornography or stalking or harassment. In fact, one of our previous guests on the Global Hope 365 Coffee Meetup, when I had my prep meeting with her, she shared with me that she was a victim of human trafficking. And then we left the decision up to her whether to share it with our audience, and she did. And the one thing she said that really sticks in my mind is that I wish my parents were monitoring my phone. I wouldn't have been in that situation that I am in.
That's exactly right. I mean, 70%, like I said, are engaged, are the way they're recruited, groomed is through social media. It's extremely destructive. One other law that I meant to mention is most of our human trafficking, sex trafficking happened on Backpage a few years ago. It was a horrific site that was allowed to go on for years. We could not shut it down. They hid after the First Amendment Privacy and Communications Act, that's 230. We were able to pass a law. This is a federal law because it controls the airwaves, that a platform can't hide if what they're doing is actually promoting illegal activities such as human trafficking. But more is needed there. I firmly believe that you know um, all of these sites, that they're smart people, they're smart tech people. They can do more to set up algorithms to protect children, but I don't think they want to because it's too profitable. So there is an organization called Humans Against Trafficking. Roger Martin used to be a Qualcomm guy, and he's on our collective. And he had to do it on his own. He spent his own money and his own resources to get some algorithms that help parents check their kids and see whether there's a little bit of a warning sign, certain language that's a warning sign. Doesn't mean it's happening, but something to look at further. And it's getting very close to launch. So I would look also at Humans Against Trafficking and look at their app